start this segment with something I see as a portrait in courage. It's from Ed Stack, the CEO of Dick's Sporting Goods. This morning, he announced his company is done with selling semi-automatic rifles like the ones used in the Florida school shooting.
Everybody talks about thoughts and prayers going out to them, and that's great. But that doesn't really do anything, and we felt that we needed to take a stand and do this. But when you look at those kids and their parents and the grief that everyone's going through, and we don't want to be a part of this story any longer. We actually sold the shooter a shotgun in November of last year. And we looked at that and found out that we did this. We had a pit in our stomach and said, we don't want to be a part of this story, and we need a responsibility to these kids.
As our lawmakers do nothing to try to stem the deadly use of these military-grade weapons, people are acting without them. Dick's, Delta, United, gun store owners who aren't part of the big chains, gun owners themselves, citizens are taking the wheel as we get comments like this from our national leaders.
We shouldn't be banning guns for law-abiding citizens. We should be focusing on making sure that citizens who should not get guns in the first place don't get those guns. And that is why we see a big breakdown in the system here.
In other words, that is the NRA party line. Blame bad parenting, video games, mental health failings, anything but guns. So let's talk about this. Joining me to discuss is Ethan Bierman, a progressive talk radio host, and John Fredericks is with me. He's a conservative talk radio host. John, the president is supposedly going to sit down with a group of bipartisan lawmakers and talk about ways to keep our kids safe from guns, gunfire. Do you suppose anything will come of that?
It should. And I think the president has laid out a clear compromise position, which I hope that Republicans in Congress will take.
What is that? Because I'm not aware of that compromise position. What is that?
He's got a great compromise position, and I'll tell you what it is. It's a 4-point plan that can finally maybe solve this and save some lives. Number one is, and he's already said this, he's got to get rid of the bump stock that turns a semi-automatic into a machine gun. He said, if you don't legislate it, I'll do an executive order. That's got to go. I'm for that. Second thing he said is a 21-year-old can get a drink and buy a handgun, but an 18-year-old cannot. Therefore, what we're going to do is we're going to look at not selling any guns, semi-automatics or anything else, to anybody under 21. Until you're 21, you can't own a gun except for those that are in the military or have an honorable discharge. That's a great compromise he's got. The other thing he said is we have to tighten the background checks. If you look at the failure in Florida, I mean, it's unbelievable what happened in Broward County. There were 45 phone calls to Cruz's home, all of them connected to some kind of violence. It falls through the cracks. That's a disaster. So the president had said, we're going to do these things. Now, what I want in return is I want a school teacher that chooses to carry their concealed weapon into a school, not compulsory. They choose to do it. They go through additional training. Look, I coach high school basketball. I have a concealed permit. I can't take my gun on the parking lot. I got to leave it at home. Somebody comes in my gymnasium where I got 15 players, we're sitting ducks. That's reality. I should be able to have that option.
So wait, John, you would feel comfortable carrying a loaded weapon.
That's the compromise position.
Well, I'm just asking, you would feel comfortable carrying a loaded weapon while coaching basketball, running up and down the court? It's very active.
No, it would be. It certainly wouldn't be. It certainly wouldn't be on me. It would be in my bag. But if you're a math teacher and you make the decision that you want to bring your weapon into school, you make that decision, and you've gone through the training that'll allow you to do that. Why should you not be able to do that? And the thing is, the shooter that
no, I hear you. I want to bring Ethan. I want to bring Ethan into the conversation.
5 people have guns or 50.
I get it, but the gun's in your bag, and by the time the gunman bursts into the gym, it's too late. But
yeah, but they don't.
But I hear you. I'm willing to have an open mind, as you know, John, because I think you too have an open mind. But I want to bring Ethan into the conversation. So, and I know you do. I even wrote about it in my op-ed. I know you do. So I want to bring Ethan into the conversation. So the president is going to lay out all of what John just illustrated to a bipartisan group of lawmakers. It does not appear to me that lawmakers are willing to do much about any of this stuff.
Yeah, they're beholden to their donors and to some percentage of their voting base who have a complete misunderstanding of the Second Amendment. And we know this because of Justice Scalia's majority opinion in D.C. versus Heller. Section 3 clearly lays out that we can highly regulate firearms. The state has unbelievable leeway to regulate, as we should. I'm a firearm owner too, by the way. Totally. In addition to what the president is proposing, we need to ban not just bump stocks, anything that modifies the firing rate of any semi-automatic weapon, period, and they should be confiscated. We need to look to Germany for a psychological background check. We need full universal background checks. We need to put in some of those other pieces that John was just mentioning that the president has talked about too, but nothing, no reason at all to have a magazine that's greater than 10 rounds or anything that modifies to make it greater than 10 rounds. But to your point, Carol, I just don't believe, I couldn't believe Speaker Ryan yesterday. That is for shame. I have family who are teachers across this country. I have family in places like Wisconsin, including Wisconsin. All of my teacher family members, who, by the way, some of them include NRA members, all of them universally are saying, we don't need additional firearms on school grounds. If anybody's going to have that, it's going to be law enforcement. And we have to figure out what happened down in Florida with law enforcement who was on site. This is the
interesting, and I hear you. The interesting thing that's happening, John, is that the CEO of Dick's Sporting Goods, he's taking matters into his own hands. He's going to increase background checks for the people who come in to buy guns in his stores. He's going to raise the age himself to 21. He's not waiting for Congress or the president to act. He's not going to sell these assault-style weapons anymore. He says, if I can save one life, that's enough for me. So you have people, just retailers, acting without Congress. They're not waiting. And I find that sad. I mean, I'm happy that they're acting, but I find it sad that they're not waiting for lawmakers to do the responsible thing and to get, to get their asses moving.
Congress has got an opportunity here, Carol, to really get something done. And the president was so right when he said, look, talk, nothing ever gets done. Let's find a compromise. I was at CPAC, and I was very disappointed that the National Rifle Association, the NRA, comes out immediately on the 21-year-old, don't buy a gun till you're 20. By the way, you cannot buy in America a handgun, a Glock, until you're 21, but you can buy an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle. Makes no sense, right? Illogical. But that's how it is. But the NRA comes out as soon as the president makes the statement and comes out in opposition of it and chokes off the debate. And so that's the problem. You can't even have a rational discussion. I thought what the NRA should have done was say, you know what, let's take a look at this. Let's think it through. Let's have a discussion, a conversation, a dialogue. Maybe we can reach a compromise. No, they choked it off, and then the minions fall in line, and we get nowhere. That's the problem.
So Ethan, do you think that, what is your prediction? I will end the conversation with that. What is your prediction on Congress doing anything in the short term to keep kids safe at school?
I think that Congress is utterly spineless on this topic. Baby steps aren't even good enough for them. As John was just pointing out, they're spineless. It's a midterm election cycle. They're afraid. The Republicans are afraid of losing to the Democrats and having Nancy Pelosi be Speaker of the House again. They are afraid. They're running scared. The NRA is pulling their strings like they're puppets. It's gross. It's disgusting. And they should lose their jobs for it. So, Paul Ryan, I'm speaking to you, Speaker Ryan. Maybe you should be losing to Iron Stash this year.
That's the guy who's running against him in his district.
The Republicans, Carol and Ethan, have nothing to fear but fear itself. They need to go forward on this and follow the president's lead and get something done. And then maybe they can actually win.
Maybe so. Maybe so. This march that's going to happen on March 24th that these kids have organized, I bet there's going to be more than 1 million people at that march, and that will be interesting. Maybe that will finally force their hands to do something. John Fredericks, Ethan Bierman, thank you so much for being with me.